The moment a badge begins trusting assumptions more than evidence, it stops protecting justice and starts testing it. At precisely 7:38 on a cool Thursday morning, every patrol officer assigned to the East District assembled inside the department briefing room expecting an ordinary shift change. Instead of reviewing calls for service or discussing patrol assignments, they found Police Chief William Harper standing silently beside Assistant Director Rebecca Collins from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. No one spoke. The room felt unusually still as officers exchanged uncertain glances, trying to understand why a federal executive had appeared without advance notice. Chief Harper looked across the room before speaking in a calm but unmistakably serious voice. Every officer assigned to Patrol Unit 12 will immediately surrender your badge, department identification, vehicle keys, and portable radio pending administrative review. This is not a criminal proceeding. This is an administrative action based upon documented evidence. Cooperate fully, and further instructions will follow. The words settled over the room with a weight no one expected. Officer Ethan Walker stood frozen for several seconds before slowly reaching toward the silver badge attached to his uniform. Around him, fellow officers looked equally confused. Some searched the faces of their supervisors, hoping for an explanation that never came. Others quietly removed their equipment without asking a single question. Assistant Director Collins remained composed, holding a sealed evidence binder against her side without offering any comment. Her presence alone suggested that whatever had happened extended far beyond the authority of the local department. Ethan's mind raced through every call he had answered during the previous week. He replayed traffic stops, neighborhood disputes, accident reports, and routine patrols, searching for anything that could explain why an entire unit now faced suspension. Nothing seemed significant enough to justify federal involvement. He glanced toward Sergeant Daniel Brooks, but the veteran supervisor offered only a brief nod that revealed neither anger nor sympathy. Whatever answers existed were already contained somewhere inside the investigation. Chief Harper waited until every badge rested on the long conference table before quietly adding one final sentence. The evidence has already been preserved. Those 6 words echoed louder than everything else that morning because they meant the outcome would not depend upon memory, opinion, or personal explanation. It would depend entirely upon what cameras, radio transmissions, computer records, and official documentation had captured in real time. Ethan lowered his eyes toward the empty place on his uniform where his badge had rested only moments earlier. For the first time in his career, he understood how vulnerable authority becomes when every decision can be examined frame by frame. The silence inside the room grew almost unbearable until the image of a black sport utility vehicle unexpectedly surfaced in his memory. It had seemed like nothing more than another routine traffic stop during the previous afternoon. The driver had remained respectful. The paperwork had appeared ordinary. The entire encounter should have lasted no more than a few minutes. Yet something about that stop refused to leave his thoughts. 14 hours earlier, beneath a bright autumn sky and surrounded by the steady rhythm of morning commuters, Officer Ethan Walker activated his emergency lights behind that black sport utility vehicle, completely unaware that the decisions he was about to make would soon place the future of his entire patrol unit into the hands of evidence that never forgot anything. Officer Ethan Walker stepped out of his patrol vehicle as the black sport utility vehicle came to a smooth stop along the shoulder of the divided highway. Morning sunlight reflected across the windshield while traffic continued flowing steadily in the neighboring lanes. Nothing about the situation appeared unusual. The vehicle had signaled late while changing lanes before briefly crossing the painted line, a routine traffic violation that normally resulted in a warning or a citation before everyone continued with the rest of their day. Walker adjusted his body camera, approached the driver's window, and greeted the driver in a professional tone. The man behind the wheel lowered the window immediately, placed both hands where they remained clearly visible, and offered a calm smile. "Good morning, officer." Walker introduced himself and explained the reason for the stop before requesting a driver's license, vehicle registration, and proof of insurance. Without hesitation, the driver carefully retrieved each document and handed them over. "Certainly, officer," he replied. "Everything should be current." Walker accepted the paperwork and briefly examined the license. The name read Marcus Ellison. The address belonged to a quiet residential neighborhood several miles away. Every document appeared organized, valid, and consistent. Marcus never asked why he had been stopped, never challenged the officer's explanation, and never displayed frustration. Instead, he simply waited while Walker returned to the patrol vehicle to begin the routine records check. Within moments, dispatch acknowledged the inquiry. The driver's license was valid. The registration matched the vehicle. Insurance coverage remained active. No outstanding warrants appeared. No alerts required additional investigation. No stolen vehicle report existed. Every available database returned the same conclusion. Everything was in order. Under ordinary circumstances, that information would have marked the natural conclusion of the encounter. Walker could have issued a warning, explained the traffic violation, and allowed Marcus to continue his trip within a matter of minutes. Instead, he continued studying the computer screen even after every response had been received. Something continued bothering him, although he could not identify any objective fact supporting that feeling. He requested a second records verification through dispatch. The dispatcher sounded slightly surprised but completed the request without objection. Once again, every response returned exactly the same results. Valid identification, valid registration, valid insurance, no warrants, no criminal alerts, no investigative notifications. Walker remained seated inside the patrol vehicle, staring through the windshield toward the waiting sport utility vehicle. Marcus had not moved. His hands remained resting comfortably on the steering wheel exactly where the officer could easily see them. Several passing motorists slowed briefly before continuing along the highway, unaware that a routine stop had already extended beyond its ordinary purpose. After another quiet moment, Walker stepped out of the patrol vehicle and returned to the driver's window. Marcus greeted him with the same calm expression he had shown from the beginning. "Is there anything else you need from me, officer?" he asked politely. Walker paused before answering. "I have completed the records checks, but I need to ask you a few additional questions." Marcus nodded respectfully. "Of course, I will answer whatever I can." There was no argument, no impatience, and no attempt to leave. The conversation remained courteous on both sides, yet the encounter continued without any new evidence. While several miles away, a secure federal notification had already begun traveling quietly through systems that neither man standing beside the highway could see. Officer Ethan Walker studied Marcus Ellison for another quiet moment before asking several routine questions that produced equally routine answers. Marcus explained that he was traveling to an early meeting downtown and had left home well before the morning rush to avoid heavy traffic. His voice never changed. His posture remained relaxed. Every response came without hesitation, and nothing he said conflicted with the information already displayed on the patrol computer. Walker listened carefully, yet the uneasy feeling that had settled into his thoughts refused to disappear. It was not supported by anything he could point to, but he continued allowing instinct to compete with documented facts. Marcus noticed the extended pause and spoke with the same respectful tone he had maintained from the beginning. "Officer, if there is additional information you need, I will gladly provide it." Walker nodded but did not immediately answer. Instead, he glanced once more at the driver's license resting in his hand before returning to the patrol vehicle. Inside the cruiser, he reviewed every available database for a third time. The results remained unchanged. Valid driver's license, valid registration, active insurance, no warrants, no criminal alerts, no investigative flags. The computer offered nothing that justified continuing the encounter beyond the original traffic violation. Walker requested that Sergeant Daniel Brooks respond to his location. Dispatch acknowledged the request and advised that the supervisor was only a few minutes away. While waiting, Walker continued observing the black sport utility vehicle through the windshield. Marcus remained exactly where he had been instructed to stay. He made no telephone calls, displayed no frustration, and never questioned why the stop had become unusually long. Several minutes later, Sergeant Brooks arrived and parked behind the patrol car. After receiving a brief summary, Brooks asked the first question that mattered. What objective facts support extending the stop beyond the completed traffic investigation? Walker hesitated before answering. Something does not feel right. Brooks remained calm. Feeling uncertain is not the same as having objective facts. What evidence do you have? Walker looked toward Marcus's vehicle before quietly admitting, nothing specific. Brooks nodded slowly and walked with Walker toward the driver's window. Marcus greeted the supervisor politely. Brooks introduced himself and explained that he wanted to ensure the stop was being handled appropriately. Marcus thanked him for coming and answered every question with the same patience he had shown throughout the encounter. At one point, Brooks asked whether Marcus wished to provide any additional identification beyond the driver's license already presented. Marcus gave a slight nod. Yes, Sergeant. I have my Federal Bureau of Investigation credentials in my wallet. I have not presented them because this is a local traffic stop, and I believe it should be handled exactly like any other traffic stop. Brooks looked briefly toward Walker before returning his attention to Marcus. May I see those credentials, sir? Marcus carefully removed a leather credential holder and handed it across. Brooks opened it, studied the identification for several seconds, and his expression remained professional even as he immediately recognized the significance of the title displayed inside. He handed the credentials back without changing his tone. Thank you, sir. Brooks then stepped away from the vehicle and quietly contacted dispatch through a secure supervisor channel, requesting confidential identity verification rather than discussing the information over the primary radio frequency. Less than a minute later, the secure communication system generated a priority confirmation that immediately moved beyond local dispatch and toward federal notification channels, beginning a chain of events that neither Officer Walker nor the passing motorists along the highway could yet understand. Sergeant Daniel Brooks waited until he reached his patrol vehicle before reading the secure verification message that had just arrived through the encrypted supervisor channel. The response was brief, precise, and unmistakable. The credentials presented by Marcus Ellison had been authenticated without exception. The notification instructed local command to maintain normal professional procedure, while additional federal contacts were informed through established channels. Brooks lowered the mobile computer screen for a moment and took a slow breath before contacting dispatch again through the secure line. Within seconds, the information moved from the communications center to Police Chief William Harper and simultaneously to the nearest Federal Bureau of Investigation field office. No emergency tones sounded across the radio system. No public announcements were made. Every step followed established protocol designed to protect both operational security and professional integrity. Back beside the black sport utility vehicle, Marcus Ellison remained exactly where he had been since the traffic stop began. His driver's license, registration, and insurance had already been verified. Every database inquiry remained clear. He never mentioned his position again and never asked that the stop end because of his title. Instead, when Sergeant Brooks returned, Marcus simply asked, "Is there anything further you need from me, Sergeant?" Brooks answered respectfully, "Thank you for your patience, sir. We are completing a verification process." Marcus nodded. "I appreciate that. Please take whatever time is required. Procedure exists for a reason." His response carried neither frustration nor authority. It reflected the quiet confidence of someone who understood that public trust depends upon allowing systems to work without personal influence. A few minutes later, inside police headquarters, Chief William Harper received the secure notification and immediately contacted Assistant Director Rebecca Collins of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Rather than discussing Marcus Ellison personally, both leaders focused entirely on procedure. Collins confirmed the authenticity of the credentials and thanked the chief for using the secure verification process instead of discussing sensitive information over standard communications. Harper then made a decision that surprised several command staff members. "No one is to interfere with the traffic stop," he instructed. "No telephone calls to the scene. No special instructions. Let the officers complete their responsibilities according to department policy. After the encounter concludes, preserve every available record exactly as it exists." Collins agreed without hesitation. "That is the appropriate course of action." The integrity of the process matters more than the identity of the individual involved. While those conversations unfolded miles away, neither Officer Ethan Walker nor the passing drivers along the highway knew that both local leadership and federal leadership had deliberately chosen not to influence the encounter. Every decision would remain exactly as it had been made in real time. Every conversation would remain preserved. Every action would later be evaluated on its own merit. Back on the roadside, Brooks quietly spoke with Walker once more. Our responsibility has not changed. The question remains the same. What objective facts justify extending this stop? Walker looked toward Marcus Ellison, who continued waiting calmly inside the vehicle, then back toward the supervisor. After another long silence, he could offer nothing beyond the same uncertain feeling he had described earlier. Brooks did not argue. He simply watched the traffic moving steadily along the highway before saying, "Feelings cannot replace articulable facts." Those few words settled heavily between them as the morning continued. While unseen across multiple secure computer systems, automatic evidence preservation protocols had already begun collecting body camera footage, dashboard camera recordings, dispatch audio, computer-aided dispatch records, mobile data terminal activity, and supervisor communications into a permanent timeline that would soon speak more clearly than anyone standing beside that quiet stretch of road. Sergeant Daniel Brooks looked once more at Officer Ethan Walker before making the decision that should have been made several minutes earlier. "The lawful purpose of this traffic stop has been completed," he said in a calm voice. "Issue a written warning for the lane violation, document the encounter accurately, and allow the driver to continue." Walker nodded quietly, although the uncertainty on his face had not disappeared. He returned Marcus Ellison's driver's license, vehicle registration, proof of insurance, and Federal Bureau of Investigation credentials before explaining that the stop would conclude with a written warning rather than a citation. Marcus accepted the documents with the same respectful composure he had maintained from the beginning. "Thank you, officer," he said. "Drive safely," Walker replied. Marcus offered a courteous nod, started the engine, checked his mirrors, signaled, and carefully merged back into the steady flow of morning traffic. Within seconds, the black sport utility vehicle disappeared among hundreds of other commuters heading toward the city. There was no argument, no dramatic confrontation, and no public scene. Anyone passing the location would have believed they had witnessed nothing more than an ordinary traffic stop. Yet inside police headquarters and federal command offices, the encounter had already become something very different. Before either patrol vehicle left the shoulder of the highway, automated evidence retention procedures had already been activated. Every second of body camera footage recorded by Officer Ethan Walker and Sergeant Daniel Brooks was preserved without alteration. Dashboard camera recordings from both patrol vehicles were automatically copied into the department's secured evidence management system. Dispatch audio was archived together with the complete radio communication history. Computer-aided dispatch records documented every status change, every timestamp, every unit assignment, and every supervisory notification. Mobile data terminal activity logs preserved every database inquiry, every license verification, every registration search, every message transmitted between dispatch and patrol, and every secure communication initiated by Sergeant Brooks. Global positioning records documented the exact location of both patrol vehicles throughout the encounter. The digital evidence existed independently of anyone's memory, ensuring that no later explanation could change the sequence of events. At police headquarters, Chief William Harper instructed the Professional Standards Commander to begin preparing an administrative review package immediately after all reports had been submitted. Assistant Director Rebecca Collins made a similar decision within the Federal Bureau of Investigation. She emphasized that Director Marcus Ellison had never requested special treatment, never identified himself to avoid enforcement, and never attempted to influence the officer's decisions beyond presenting valid credentials when specifically asked. Those observations were documented alongside the preserved evidence because professional conduct applied equally to everyone involved. Meanwhile, Officer Walker and Sergeant Brooks completed their required reports before returning to regular patrol duties. Brooks carefully documented every conversation exactly as it had occurred, including the repeated requests for objective facts supporting the continued detention. Walker completed his own report with equal attention to detail, believing he had accurately described the encounter as he remembered it. Neither officer altered any statement or omitted any significant event. They simply recorded their perspectives while unaware that dozens of independent digital records already existed for comparison. As the afternoon gradually turned into evening, the evidence package continued assembling automatically across multiple secure systems without interruption or human interpretation. Cameras never forgot a pause. Computer logs never overlooked a search. Dispatch recordings never confused the order of events. Long before any formal interview would begin, the complete timeline had already been preserved exactly as it happened, waiting patiently for the following morning when facts, rather than opinions, would begin answering every question left behind beside that quiet stretch of highway. The following morning, long before the first patrol shift assembled for roll call, the professional standards conference room was already occupied. Assistant Director Rebecca Collins arrived from the Federal Bureau of Investigation shortly after sunrise, accompanied by a legal liaison whose responsibility was limited to observing the review process rather than influencing it. Police Chief William Harper welcomed them briefly before making an important announcement. This review will be conducted according to department policy and documented evidence. No conclusions have been reached, and no one will receive special consideration because of title or position. Collins agreed immediately. Director Marcus Ellison has requested nothing beyond a fair review based entirely upon the facts. With that understanding established, the administrative investigation officially began. Investigators organized every available source of evidence across a large digital display inside the conference room. Body camera recordings from Officer Ethan Walker and Sergeant Daniel Brooks appeared alongside dashboard camera footage from both patrol vehicles. Dispatch audio recordings were synchronized with computer-aided dispatch records, mobile data terminal activity logs, global positioning system history, supervisor notifications, and written reports submitted by every officer involved. Rather than reviewing each record independently, the investigators aligned every source according to a precise timeline, measured down to the second. As the synchronized evidence appeared on the screen, a remarkably consistent sequence emerged. The traffic violation occurred exactly as documented. Officer Walker initiated a lawful traffic stop. Marcus Ellison immediately complied with emergency lights and safely pulled onto the shoulder. Identification, vehicle registration, and proof of insurance were requested and provided without delay. The first records inquiry returned completely clear. A second verification produced identical results. No warrants, no criminal alerts, no investigative notifications. The timeline then highlighted the critical portion of the encounter. Although every available database confirmed the driver's information without issue, the stop continued. Investigators watched Officer Walker remain inside the patrol vehicle after all records checks had already been completed. They listened as dispatch confirmed that no additional information existed requiring further investigation. Several minutes later, Sergeant Brooks arrived after Walker requested supervisory assistance. The synchronized recordings captured Brooks asking a direct question that immediately became the central focus of the review. What objective facts support extending the stop beyond the completed traffic investigation? The investigators paused the recording before comparing it against department policy governing temporary detention during routine traffic enforcement. One investigator quietly summarized the issue. Policy permits an officer to investigate observable facts. Policy does not authorize extending a detention based solely upon an unverified feeling once the lawful purpose has been satisfied. The video resumed. Walker acknowledged that nothing specific supported his concern beyond instinct. The room remained silent while the investigators carefully documented the statement. No one criticized Walker. No one defended him. Every participant understood that opinions carried little weight compared with synchronized evidence preserved from multiple independent systems. Next, the investigators examined the moment Marcus Ellison presented his Federal Bureau of Investigation credentials. After Sergeant Brooks specifically requested additional identification, Collins observed quietly without interrupting. When asked whether Director Ellison had attempted to use his position to influence the stop, she answered with a single sentence supported by every available recording. He identified himself only after being asked and accepted the process without requesting any exception. The investigators entered that observation into the official review file before continuing with the remaining evidence, while outside the conference room Officer Ethan Walker sat alone in the hallway, unaware that every decision from the previous morning was now being measured against policy by evidence that neither memory nor explanation could change. Officer Ethan Walker remained seated outside the Professional Standards conference room while investigators continued reviewing the synchronized evidence inside. The hallway felt unusually quiet, broken only by the occasional sound of footsteps and the soft opening of office doors as personnel moved through headquarters. Every passing minute seemed longer than the traffic stop itself. Walker replayed the encounter repeatedly in his mind, searching for something he might have overlooked, some objective detail that could explain why he had allowed the stop to continue after every records inquiry had already come back clear. Nothing new surfaced. Shortly before mid-morning, the conference room door opened, and an investigator invited Walker inside. Assistant Director Rebecca Collins remained seated beside the legal liaison, observing without participating in the questioning. Police Chief William Harper intentionally remained absent from the interview itself, allowing the professional standards investigators to conduct the administrative review independently. Sergeant Daniel Brooks also entered the room as a witness and took a seat near the opposite side of the table. The lead investigator began in a calm, measured voice. Officer Walker, this administrative interview concerns your documented decisions during yesterday's traffic stop. We are interested in objective facts and your reasoning at each stage of the encounter. Please, answer each question truthfully. Walker nodded. Yes, sir. A large monitor displayed the synchronized timeline compiled from body camera footage, dashboard camera recordings, dispatch audio, computer-aided dispatch records, mobile data terminal activity, and supervisor communications. The investigator began with the opening moments of the stop. Did you observe a traffic violation before initiating emergency lights? Yes, sir. Did the driver immediately comply? Yes, sir. Were valid driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance provided? Yes, sir. Did the first records inquiry reveal any warrants, criminal alerts, investigative notifications, or conflicting information? No, sir. Did the second verification produce any different result? Walker lowered his eyes briefly before answering. No, sir. The investigator allowed several more seconds of body camera footage to play before pausing the recording at the moment Sergeant Brooks asked his question beside the driver's window. What objective facts supported extending the detention after the lawful purpose of the traffic stop had already been completed? Silence filled the room. Walker looked toward the frozen image on the monitor where Marcus Ellison remained seated calmly inside the sport utility vehicle exactly as the recording had preserved him. Finally, Walker answered quietly. I believed something was wrong, but I could not identify a specific fact. The investigator nodded without criticism. Department policy requires articulable facts supporting continued investigative detention. Can you identify any objective evidence that existed at that time, but was not documented in your report or captured by the recordings? Walker thought carefully before giving the only truthful response available. No, sir. I cannot. No one interrupted. No one raised a voice. The legal liaison simply recorded the statement while another investigator entered the answer into the official review summary. Assistant Director Collins spoke for the first time. Director Marcus Ellison never requested special treatment, never attempted to influence the officers, and never invoked his position to avoid the stop. Every available recording confirms that. The investigators acknowledged the statement because it matched every source already displayed before them. Sergeant Brooks then confirmed that he had repeatedly asked Officer Walker to identify objective facts supporting additional investigative action and that none had been presented at the scene. By the time the interview concluded, the evidence, the reports, the recordings, and Walker's own answers all pointed toward the same unavoidable conclusion, leaving the command staff with only one responsibility remaining before the administrative findings could be formally announced. By early afternoon, the administrative review reached its final stage. Every recording had been synchronized, Every report had been compared, and every decision had been measured against department policy without exception. Inside the conference room, professional standards investigators sat alongside Police Chief William Harper, Assistant Director Rebecca Collins, the department legal advisor, and senior command staff. No one spoke until the lead investigator placed the completed findings on the table. The atmosphere remained calm because everyone understood that the purpose of the meeting was not to assign blame through opinion, but to determine accountability through documented evidence. The lead investigator reviewed the timeline one final time. The original traffic violation had been lawful. Officer Ethan Walker possessed legal authority to initiate the stop. Marcus Ellison immediately complied with emergency lights, produced valid identification, valid vehicle registration, and valid proof of insurance. Every records inquiry returned without warrants, criminal alerts, investigative notifications, or conflicting information. The supervisor arrived after Officer Walker requested assistance. During that conversation, Sergeant Daniel Brooks repeatedly asked for objective facts supporting continued detention beyond the completed traffic investigation. None were presented. The body camera recordings, dashboard camera footage, dispatch audio, computer-aided dispatch records, mobile data terminal activity, and written reports all confirmed the same sequence without contradiction. The lead investigator closed the evidence file before speaking clearly. The administrative review concludes that Officer Walker continued the detention after the lawful purpose of the traffic stop had been satisfied without articulable objective facts required under department policy. The review further concludes that supervisory and procedural failures within Patrol Unit 12 require administrative action extending beyond a single officer. The room remained completely silent. Assistant Director Collins looked toward Chief Harper before offering only one observation. Director Marcus Ellison has asked that this outcome not be viewed as a matter involving his position within the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He requested only that the review follow the same standards that would apply to every citizen. Harper nodded in agreement. That request has been honored from beginning to end. He then signed the administrative order placed before him. The document directed that every member assigned to Patrol Unit 12 be placed on administrative suspension pending additional departmental review concerning supervisory compliance, decision-making, and procedural responsibilities. The decision reflected the command staff's determination that accountability belonged not only to individual actions but also to the systems responsible for ensuring policy was followed. Shortly afterward, Officer Ethan Walker and the remaining members of Patrol Unit 12 were instructed to report to the briefing room. The same room that had welcomed them every morning now carried a very different purpose. Chief Harper addressed the assembled officers in a steady voice. This administrative action is based entirely upon documented evidence preserved during yesterday's incident. It is not influenced by title, public attention, or outside pressure. It is the result of our obligation to uphold the standards expected of every member of this department. One by one, the officers quietly stepped forward and placed their badges, department identification cards, portable radios, and patrol vehicle keys onto the long conference table. No one argued. No one attempted to defend decisions already preserved by cameras and official records. Officer Ethan Walker looked briefly at the badge resting in his hand before placing it beside the others. The polished silver shield had represented authority throughout his career. Yet in that moment he understood that authority without disciplined judgment could never preserve public trust. As the final badge touched the table, complete silence filled the room once again, while hundreds of miles away Marcus Ellison returned to his responsibilities at the Federal Bureau of Investigation, unaware that the greatest lesson from the previous morning was no longer about who had been stopped on a highway, but about how truth had quietly guided every decision after the evidence began telling its own story. 8 months later, the events from that quiet morning no longer existed only inside evidence archives or administrative files. They had become part of the department's leadership curriculum, presented to every newly promoted supervisor and every recruit preparing to wear a badge for the first time. Inside the Police Academy Training Auditorium, instructors displayed synchronized body camera footage, dashboard camera recordings, dispatch communications, computer-aided dispatch records, mobile data terminal activity, and official policy side by side. Before the presentation began, the lead instructor faced the class and offered only one instruction. Do not focus on who the driver was. Focus on why each decision mattered. The room became completely silent as the recording showed Officer Ethan Walker initiating a lawful traffic stop for a minor traffic violation. The recruits watched Marcus Ellison immediately pull onto the shoulder, provide valid identification, vehicle registration, proof of insurance, and answer every question respectfully. They watched dispatch confirm that every records inquiry returned clear. They listened as Sergeant Daniel Brooks repeatedly asked the same question that would eventually shape the entire investigation. What objective facts support extending this stop? The instructor paused the recording before turning toward the class. Everything important happens right here, he said calmly. The law allows officers to investigate facts. It does not allow assumptions to replace them. Several recruits quietly took notes while others continued watching the frozen image displayed across the large screen. The lesson was no longer about one officer or one citizen. It had become a reminder that professional judgment is measured during ordinary moments rather than extraordinary ones. Across the city, Marcus Ellison continued serving as director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation with the same quiet professionalism that had defined him throughout the encounter. He never gave interviews about the traffic stop, never criticized the officers publicly, and never attempted to transform the incident into personal recognition. When colleagues occasionally mentioned the investigation, he always returned to the same principle. Public confidence grows when every person accepts the same process. Assistant Director Rebecca Collins carried the experience into leadership seminars throughout the Bureau, emphasizing that cooperation between local law enforcement and federal agencies depends upon mutual respect, transparent procedures, and accountability supported by evidence rather than emotion. Police Chief William Harper also addressed the incident only as a professional case study. He reminded supervisors that accountability protects honorable officers just as much as it protects the communities they serve, because consistent standards strengthen public trust instead of weakening it. Sergeant Daniel Brooks continued mentoring younger officers, encouraging them to ask one simple question before extending any encounter beyond its original purpose. What objective facts support my next decision? That question gradually became part of the department's everyday culture because everyone understood how much could change when it remained unanswered. As for Ethan Walker, he accepted the administrative outcome without attempting to shift responsibility elsewhere. Time gave him the opportunity to reflect upon the difference between instinct and evidence, authority and restraint, confidence and certainty. Looking back, he realized that the most important person beside the highway had never been identified by a title, a badge, or a federal credential. The most important presence had been the truth quietly recorded by cameras, computers, and careful documentation from the first moment until the last. Imagine standing beside a peaceful highway believing that authority alone will carry every decision, only to discover that the strongest voice in any investigation belongs to evidence that remembers everything. Badges may grant responsibility, titles may command respect, and positions may carry influence, but lasting justice belongs only to those willing to let facts speak before assumptions ever have the chance.